Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New Mexico.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey, 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 3 minutes.
Yeah, I thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from New Mexico. H.R. 2938 should not have been brought to the House floor under suspension of the rules. This legislation doesn't name a post office or authorize a park study. H.R. 2938 instead is a highly controversial piece of legislation that will amend a settlement agreement between the United States and an Indian tribe, impose restrictions on a tribe's authority to use its own land, and circumvent years of federal and state court rulings. During consideration by the Natural Resources Committee, members from both sides of the aisle expressed concern about this measure. House members have heard from tribes across the country, Arizona state legislators, local mayors, small business owners, and community leaders on both sides of this aisle. The number of stakeholders with strong feelings on both sides of this issue is plain evidence that the bill does not belong on suspension. So, we're here tonight. The implications for local, regional, and national gaming industry precedents are quite significant. And we should only bring suspension-worthy bills out here on the floor. And I say that because Mr. Grijalva from Arizona, whose tribal constituents are the sole target of this legislation, is being denied this opportunity and therefore any chance to address his constituents' needs. And I think that since it does affect his district, his tribe, he's on the Natural Resources Committee, he deserves the right to be able to make amendments that can improve this legislation, and he is not going to be allowed to do that. And so that is my view on this bill, that it's under the wrong process. Suspensions are really meant for bills that do not bring the level of complexity, the level of controversy that a bill like this brings to the House floor, and as a result, I urge a no vote.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Speaker, reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved.
Gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, 3 minutes.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Grijalva, stated the facts very clearly. In the 1950s, the federal government condemned and seized land and water rights owned by the Tohono O'odham Indian Nation. In 1986, Congress settled the tribe's outstanding claims by agreeing in part to take into trust replacement land that the Tohono O'odham might acquire under specific conditions. The tribe has acquired a particular parcel meeting all of the conditions set forth in the law and asserted its rightful claim under that law. This bill retroactively and fundamentally alters that settlement, breaking the promises the Tohono O'odham have relied upon as they spent many years and millions of dollars acquiring this parcel and planning the project. Now, why in the world would we want to do such a thing? Well, it's obvious. Like many tribes, the Tohono O'odham want to build a casino on this land. Now, this casino would compete with another tribe's casino in the region, and that tribe doesn't want the competition. Competition is so annoying and inconvenient. It requires offering your customers a better service at a lower price. Tohono O'odham seeks to do that. The other tribe doesn't want to. So that other tribe, which has a monopoly on gaming in the Phoenix area, created a front made up of anti-gambling pressure groups and NIMBY activists to try and stop them. They have been defeated in the courts at every turn. So what to do? What to do? They don't want to compete for customers. They don't have a leg to stand on in court. What is left? Well, of course, get Congress to break its promise, which is why we're all here tonight. Let's be very clear about what passing this bill would mean. Many in this House have rightly criticized the President for killing thousands of jobs to satisfy his ideological commitment, or opposition rather, to the Keystone Pipeline. Well, this bill does exactly the same thing. It kills 6,000 construction jobs and 3,000 permanent ongoing service jobs by blocking this project on ideological grounds. But the damage only begins there. Federal taxpayers will become liable for hundreds of millions of dollars of economic damages to compensate the Tohono O'odham for lost profits, for the devaluation of their property, and for years of planning suddenly rendered worthless by this act. So what's the balance sheet here? On the plus side, we satisfy the ideological itch of anti-gaming busybodies and anti-growth zealots, and we protect a gambling monopoly in Phoenix from any competition. On the minus side, we destroy 6,000 construction jobs, 3,000 service jobs, and we open our constituents to hundreds of millions of dollars of damages that we are certain to lose in court. I'd suggest that this bill ought to be laughed off the floor, but there's nothing in it to laugh about.
Gentleman yields.
Speaker, reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Alaska.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Swiker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I come to this with a somewhat unique view because I was actually there 19 years ago as the majority whip in the Arizona State House when this was originally being negotiated. I sat in the rooms hour after hour after hour for months with many of these Native American communities and these very discussions about what would happen in this type of scenario and the assurances that were given to those of us who were in the legislature, who were having to make this decision, that this would never happen. And I've listened to a little bit of this testimony, even from my good friend here from California, and the facts don't line up. First off, in the gaming agreements, in the compacts, there's the language about the distance from the base Aboriginal territories and how far things could move away from that. This is outside that. The jobs numbers are an absolute fantasy for the construction. And I think Mr. Franks actually went over that in his discussion earlier. But why do I stand here so passionately supporting Trent's bill? If this happens, it's going to destroy the nature of my state. Because understand, the compacts go kaboom, that the cascade begins. And this isn't just for Arizona. It will be all over the country. I promise you, in a few years, you will wake up and my state will be a statewide gaming state. And then when this becomes precedent, understand all your states are now in play. This is more than just us being, having a dispute with the Tohono O'odhams. That isn't what this is about. This is about keeping the promises that were made for many of us who were in battle in building these compacts years ago. Let's have everyone keep their promise, and let's keep the deal we made. And with that,
Gentleman yields.
Well, the gentleman yield for a moment. If he doesn't have the time, I'll give him additional. Do the tribe in question, do they have a casino on their own property?
oh yeah, I think they have multiple casinos. And there was like another fact that bounced up here, Mr. Speaker. There's actually, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 casinos in the urban area by, I think, 3 different Native American communities. This isn't about defending one, tribe versus another. This is about, there's 21 tribes in Arizona. And, the agreements that have been put together, heaven forbid what you're going to do to these communities, particularly the rural ones that get some of the sharing, if we blow up the compacts through my state.
Thank you.
And with that, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time expired. Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Grijalva, as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Lujan. I think important points to clarify. One is that the nation, the Tohono O'odham Nation's proposed gaming facility in this land that was authorized by Congress would violate its tribal state gaming compact or Prop 202. The Department of Interior has spoken clearly on this issue and confirmed in Section 3J of the Tribal State Gaming Compact clearly allows the nation to develop a gaming facility of the land. Nothing in Proposition 202 would disallow the nation from gaming in the Phoenix metropolitan area, as the other 5 to 6 casinos show. that there was a gentleman agreement for no additional casinos in Phoenix. Well, there was no such side deal. The line of argument is, I think, after the fact rationalization for a position that is entirely unsupported by the letter of the law, the compact, and all elements of, as stated, all elements of tribal state gaming agreement must be embodied in the compact and must be approved by the Department of Interior. And I think that we have to look what has not been said. The United States breach, if this becomes law, will void the nation's release of its original land claims and open the United States to a liability that was valued at $100 million in 1986 dollars. The breach will also open the portion of the nation's original water claims settlement. This settlement is key to the negotiations going on now with Salt River Project, the Central Arizona Water Conservation District, the State of Arizona, the Maricopa Stanfield Water District, and the Central Arizona Irrigation Districts, all affecting the very precious commodity in Arizona, which is water. So at the expense of those liabilities, and that breach could cost not only the state of Arizona, but the United States taxpayer millions and millions of dollars, and loss in settlements that are so vitally needed around the water issues affecting Arizona and the West. And with that, let me thank the chairman and Mr. Lujan and yield back.
Gentleman yields.
Mr. Chairman, we yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Alaska.
Mr. Chairman, I can say that this is somewhat difficult for me because I have a rule about laws that are being passed in members' districts, and I usually support Mr. Franks represents that district. And I will say Mr. Rahovo has made some statements that I would suggest that Congress makes laws and Congress can remake laws. Lawsuits, that's a scare tactic. They can sue all they want. One of the problems we have in America today is we have too many lawyers, and you can sue anything and anybody, anytime, anywhere. This is a battle about a state and a large group of American natives that reached an agreement. Mr. Kozar said this very clearly. He was there, and they reached an agreement, and they are signatures. We had a hearing on this legislation. We had quite an intensive hearing, and that was brought up. And of course, they can cite all the arguments they want, but they also understand that when a state's involved under the native gaming laws, which I and Mo Udall sponsored, the state had to be directly involved. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gambling any place in Arizona. Because the state probably would not have agreed to that if there hadn't been an agreement between all the tribes. There would be no more than was established in the compact. And I think we have to consider the state's belief in this because that does affect the state. It probably wouldn't have any gambling at all. This money from those existing 5 casinos is shared even by the tribe requesting this casino outside their territory where they have their own casinos. They want it in the Phoenix area, and we all know that. And this is about money. There's no doubt about that. But what concerns me the most is the compact. And when I listen to this, when you make an agreement, and you're a tribe, and you agree to something, don't try to go around and try to change that later on by asking some lawyers. When we talk about finances and where the finances is coming from, we could find that out too later on. So I yield back the balance of my time with understanding this is an Arizona battle, but as chairman I have to listen to both sides. And right now I come down on the side that Arizona, the state of, has an agreement, and we ought to live by it. Yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed.
The nays are 78, 2 being recorded as present, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.